You may also know that our fearless leader from Stanford is also a native upstate New Yorker. Savanti and I both rated his photo album. And Stanford folks in the room may not know that our very first president of Stanford, David Starr Jordan, is also a native. He grew up just a little way south of me, different eras. But grew up a little way south of me in what's now Wyoming County, and was actually a Cornell alum. Studied at Cornell before coming out west to run Stanford. So that's pretty cool. So we have a lot of connections, Stanford and Cornell. So it's been a lot of fun to be here with you guys this week, and I really appreciate everything. It's been a blast. So all of us took a lot of bizarre paths to get to where we are in alumni relations. I'm certainly no exception to that. I actually studied music when I was at Stanford. I actually got my first job after graduation with my music degree. My parents didn't think that was going to happen, so it made them feel a lot better when I decided to double major in music and human biology. As a musician at heart, I knew that the lifelong commitment of medicine wasn't something that I really felt passion for. So I decided within human biology to find a different niche. So I went towards genetics and studied human evolution. And that actually makes more sense than you might think. So you have genetics, you have music, patterns, right? Both have patterns. I like patterns. So those of you who have had to sit through my segmentation talks at other conferences like this will know that makes a little bit of sense. The more I got into the study of humanity, the story of us, the more interesting that story became. You know, there was a time in genetics when we thought that different races evolved independently of each other. And this fueled notions of racial bias and superiority of one race over another. We know this is completely not true. We are one small human family that started out in Africa and spread all over the world in a really very short period of time. We all started out from a population in southern Africa, likely, that was a lot like the modern-day San people that you see here. You may know them as the Bushmen. Some say that if you look into the faces of the San people, you can see all the peoples of the world. You can see, if you look closely, Asian features, European features, African features, Native American features. It's really pretty beautiful. We actually, interestingly, all share a common ancestor. Every living human being on this planet shares a common ancestor that goes back no farther than about 5,000 years. Isn't that amazing? 5,000 years ago. We've had a lot of talk about influence and influencers at this conference. Like, talk about influence. How'd you like to give rise to all of humanity? Right? Everybody on this planet. That individual had no idea whatsoever that they did that. It's going to happen again. There could be someone living today in the world that gives rise to all of future humanity. Could be one of you. So you never know the influence you're going to have. By the way, these pictures I'm showing you are from the Genographic Project at National Geographic. It's a really cool project that is trying to create an atlas of the human journey in a very kind of cool crowdsourced way, where they have people from around the world actually submit their own stories of their own families, put those all together in their own photos, and tell the story of people. I think things get even more interesting when we think about how we describe ourselves to others. And by others, I really mean others. What can you say about a species that can go out and ask through radio signals and emissaries, like the little Voyager probe you see here, one key fundamental question: are we alone? You could say that this is our technological achievement at work. This is our intellectual curiosity. But actually, I think it's something else. I think it's a reflection of us. I think it shows one of our biggest fears: to actually be alone, to send a call out into that blackness and have that answer never come. We are a social animal. We are still gathered around that ancient campfire. One small family that's spread out of Africa all over the world many years ago. And we still want to know that when we make that call, someone's going to be there to respond. This is important when we think about influence and influencers, and it's more relevant than you might think to our work. So what did Duncan Watts teach us? He taught us that it isn't some small group of, it isn't a small group of massively influential individuals. Change influence happens through the structure and the power of the network itself, right? This goes back to the forest fire metaphor. I like this a lot. It's not about special magical matches. It's about how dry the grass is. That's what's going to tell us if the fire is going to spread or not. That has an interesting implication. Any match, anywhere, has the power to start a fire that engulfs the whole forest if the conditions are right. That's pretty powerful. Let's talk about Frodo for a minute. If you think about it, that idea of something being able to spread isn't very different from what we have in our lore, in our own culture, right? You can think of epics like Gilgamesh or the Odyssey, or maybe something a little bit more fun. It starts out with an ordinary person. It could be Frodo, it could be Luke, it could be Harry. But it's about an ordinary person who rises up in extraordinary circumstances, right? Because the world calls upon them to do so. They don't do it alone. Frodo had Sam, Luke had Princess Leia, Han Solo, Harry had Ron and Hermione. And they also had a forest that was uniquely ready to burn, right? It was the times, it was the swell of history that picked them up and moved them along. So the individual is important, but it's also these other factors that are also very important. So what I think actually is that we are all influencers. We believe that we can all, any one of us, rise up and change the world when the world calls upon us to do so. And why do we know this? Because it's true. It's in all of our stories. It's in these stories that have been handed down over hundreds of generations to us. And we know we can't do it alone. As I thought about this more and more, I thought that maybe it was actually possibly my music degree that would help me think about influence, even more than my human biology degree. Maybe we're all notes on a piano. When one note plays, the sound reverberates through the rest of the piano. And when one note plays, it can't do much by itself. It makes its call, but without a response, it can't do much to answer that response. And it just feels sort of, I guess, for lack of a better word, lonely. But when all the notes work together, you get something like this. You hear different voices playing in complex harmony. Sometimes you hear the individual voice. Sometimes you hear the other voices coming up all together. Sometimes you hear an individual call. And sometimes you hear a response from the other voices. How human is that, right? Does anybody recognize this? Any music people out there can name this? This is the Brandenburg Concerto.
I was going to say Bach.
Number 2 by Johann Sebastian Bach. This is what we put on the Voyager probe as our hopeful first contact with another world. This isn't the loudest sound we've ever produced. That, incidentally, is the sound of a nuclear explosion, dwarfed only by natural sounds like earthquakes and volcanoes. But rather, it's our voices. It's what makes us unique. It's how we want to be understood. It's how we want to introduce ourselves. And as the Voyager probe floats through space for eons, it's possible that someday this is all that's going to be left of us. So another way to think about this is how we want to be remembered. As I close my talk, I'd like to play one other song, one other piece for you here. This is a string quartet by Beethoven. And this is the last track on the golden record that is on board the Voyager probe. And if there is one day that we're not here anymore, this will be the last word. This will be the last whisper of humanity that is played to somebody, somewhere, someday. It's rare that the entire human race shares a milestone, but it's going to happen, and it's going to happen this year, in 2011. For the first time ever, there are going to be 7 billion of us on this planet. 7 billion interconnected souls from a small family in Africa that left and spread out all around the world, and came back together to tweet out into the blackness, looking for that response. All of us, notes on a piano, each one playing our note. Maybe it isn't the powerful people that are the most influential. Maybe the most influential among us are actually the most powerless. The people who rise up in times of need. The seemingly ordinary person who shows extraordinary bravery in the face of extraordinary hardship. That capture not only our imaginations, but also our hearts. And rise up and quite literally change the world. We are our voices. We are our voices. That is who we are. That is the story of us. And maybe it's less of a story. Maybe it's more of a song. So when you leave here today, wherever on earth it is you're headed, think about that note you'll play. You never know. The world may just join in. Thank you.